Alright, now let's solve the next greater element part 1 on Java. The summary of this problem is that we're given two arrays, nums1 and nums2. Now both these arrays contain unique integers, first of all, and second of all, nums1 is actually a subset of nums2, so all the elements in nums1 actually exist in nums2. Now they don't appear in the same order that they do in nums2. That they might, but it's not mandatory. And so basically what we need to do is for every number in nums1, we need to look at nums2 and scan all the elements to the right of where it appears in nums2, and we need to return in a new array that we're going to create the very next greater element that appears to the right of our number in nums2. And if a number to the right of the number that we're looking at in nums2 does not have a next greater element, then we need to return -1 instead in our array. So for example, a number like 4 in nums1, we look at 4 at nums2, it's right here. We need to scan all the elements to the right. Now in this example, the only element left is 2, and since 2 is not greater than 4, then in our output array, we return -1. Now we look at the 1. 1 exists here in our nums2 array. And if you notice, the very first next greater element after 1 is 3. So we return 3. And finally, for the 2, 2 is the last element in our array. And so there are no greater elements to the right of 2, and so we also return -1. Now the way we're going to solve this problem is we're going to use two data structures in Java, the first one being a map and the second one being a stack, which we're going to use to actually fill up values or key value pairs in our map. Now our map is going to have a key value pair which are integer to integer, and what I want my map to contain are, for every number in our nums2 array, I want it to have a value which is the next greater element after that number. So for instance, nums1, its next greater value is 3. So our key value pair in our map is going to have 1 as a key, and its value, which is the next greater element after 1, is going to be a 3. So how are we going to achieve this? Like I said, we're going to use the stack data structure, and our stack is also going to contain integers. And what we're going to be pushing into our stack is the elements or the numbers in nums2. Now, what I'm going to do is, while our stack is not empty, since we're pushing numbers into it, I'm going to compare the top of our stack, and we're going to do this element by element. And this will make sense when we begin coding. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the number at the top of our stack to the current number that we're on. And I'm going to check if the number that I'm on is greater than the number at the top of our stack. And if that's the case, then in my map, I'm going to put the top element of our stack as a key, and its value is going to be the current number which we're on in our array. And we'll get to the specifics on how we're going to do this as I code. But one thing I want to mention is our stack may or may not still have elements after we're done iterating through the elements in our nums2. And what that would mean if our stack still has elements, what those elements represent are the numbers that do not have a next greater element. But we still need to add these keys to our map, but we just need to assign them a value of -1 since they don't have any next greater element, and we're going to do that. And in the end, we're going to create an output array that has the same length as nums1, obviously. And in that array, we're just going to be filling it up with the values in our map. So if this all seems a bit vague right now, it will all make sense as we begin coding, which is right now. Oh, and before we begin, do you need help bringing a digital idea to life? From designing to developing a website or an application, look no further than Evolve Consulting. We work fast, we're affordable, and we even offer free consultations. We'll get your app running in no time. So what are you waiting for? Reach us on LinkedIn or through any of the contacts on the screen. Alright, now let's get back to the video. So like I said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our map, our stack, and we might as well create our output array as well. Now let's go ahead and begin filling up our map and utilizing our stack to fill up our map. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through all the numbers in our nums2 array. And within our loop, we're actually going to create an inner loop, an inner while loop, that first checks if our stack is empty. And if it is empty, we want to exit our while loop. And the second condition we're going to check is if the top element in our stack is less than the current number which we're on. If it's greater than that element, then we're also going to exit our while loop. Now, regardless of whether these two conditions are met or not, after we exit our while loop, we're going to push the current number which we're on in our nums2 array into our stack so we can process the next element. So two things I want to clear up is, first of all, the difference between stack.peep and stack.pop. What stack.peep does is it literally just glances, it just looks at what the top element is, whereas stack.pop not only looks at that element, but it also returns it and it removes it from our stack. And what we're doing is, while these two conditions are met in our while loop, we're going to be adding the key value pair of stack.pop, which is the last element in our stack, and its value is going to be number, as we discussed earlier. So once we exit this nested for and while loop, we may still have elements in our stack. Like I said, these indicate that they do not have any next greater elements. And what we need to do is we need to assign these keys with a value of -1. Now we're basically done. That's the hard part of our code. All we need to do now is return our output array, but obviously we need to fill it first. And the way we're going to fill it is we're going to loop through the elements in our nums1 array. But opposed to our first for loop, we're actually going to iterate it through indices. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the number in our nums1 array. We're going to get its value from our map, and we're going to store it in our output array. So let's go ahead and do that now. And in the end, we just return output. So let's submit our code and see if we have any errors. My mistake, the function is peek, not peep. I'm not sure if I said peep in the video or peek, but it's actually peek. Another silly error, we didn't indicate which nums array we are checking. We're obviously checking the elements in nums1. So let's submit again. There we go. So that was the next greater element part 1 on LeetCode. I hope you found that video helpful, and thanks for watching.